There's a possibility of that. I mean, if he makes smart moves and if he does and gets, the big issue right now is where is he going to get designated? And what that means is the BOP, Bureau of Prisons, is going to do an analysis. They're going to take the PSR, which is the pre-sentence report. They're going to take the minute order and the sentencing sheet. They're going to crunch those things. They're going to then decide where are we going to put him. They will take into account, and one of the reasons I think that Tenney asked that they hold that until Monday, they take into account where the judge recommends. Yeah, Tenney is my daughter, exactly. And they take into account where he recommends. That does not bind them.
Almost 2 years after those shocking mansion raids and a deep investigation that peeled back the dark layers of Hollywood's corruption, Sean Diddy Combs has finally been sentenced to 4 years in prison. The world watched as the once celebrated mogul faced the weight of justice, his empire shaking under the truth that came to light. But the story isn't over yet. Diddy's lawyers are already fighting back, determined to appeal the verdict and set him free. And in a twist that's turning heads, reports claim Diddy might even reach out to former President Donald Trump for a pardon, hoping that power once again can rewrite his fate.
Many people spoke in court, his attorneys, and most notably his children. That was extremely emotional. They were crying, they were talking about how much they respect their father and how hard it has been for them to not have him around, especially his children who lost their mother, Kim Porter. His lawyer, Nicole Westmoreland, also broke down crying when she talked about Sean Combs. She said that he had changed her life. And then Sean Combs himself got up and spoke in court. And he said that what's been really hard for him during this trial is having to be silent, not being able to speak on his own behalf.
Back in July, the courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. Sean Diddy Combs was found guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in illegal acts, but cleared of the heavier charges: racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking. His legal team believed this partial victory would spare him from a harsh sentence, maybe even allow him to walk free within weeks. Behind closed doors, Diddy's confidence seemed unshaken. He had already booked public speaking events for the following week, convinced his name would soon be cleared. But the reality turned out very different, and the walls around him are closing in fast.
Sean Diddy Combs will be sentenced to 50 months in prison. That is 50 months in prison. Far less than the 11 years requested, far more than the 14 months. He will not walk out of the door behind me in the courtroom today. He will not be a free man for 50 months. The judge says, which is a little shy of 4.
Before his sentencing, Sean Diddy Combs made one last attempt to show the world another side of himself. He gathered his entire family, asking them to speak on his behalf, and even filmed a heartfelt video of himself playing with his children. It was his final plea to prove that beneath the headlines and accusations, there was still a father, a son, a man who cared. Inside the courtroom, his children and even his mother stood before the judge, their voices breaking as they begged for mercy. But in the end, emotion couldn't outweigh the evidence. TMZ later obtained that video, the same one Diddy hoped would soften the court's height.
He said, "I hate myself right now," before the judge and before this sentence came down.
So, Katrina, prosecutors, though, they had wanted this sentence to be 11 years. What did the judge say when they actually handed this down?
So ultimately, the judge decided to give him this sentence of 50 months incarceration, 5 years of supervised release. And this is actually lower, it's significantly lower than what the prosecution wanted. That was about 11 years. And then the probationary recommendation was 7 years.
In a desperate final plea, Sean Diddy Combs begged the judge to release him. He claimed that his time behind bars had changed him, that he now understood the pain he caused and deeply regretted his actions. For the first time since the trial began, Diddy spoke openly, his voice trembling as he stood beside 15 inmates, members of his family, and even one of his victims. The courtroom fell quiet as he tried to convince the judge he deserved another chance. In his written letter, Diddy poured out the same plea for mercy, hoping his words could somehow undo the damage that had already been done.
And turning now to our other top story of the night, Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced to more than 4 years in prison. Over the summer, the music mogul had been found guilty on prostitution-related charges. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman was in the courtroom today in Manhattan and joins us now. Katrina, thanks for being with us here tonight. Going into today, there was the potential Combs could have even been out within weeks. So how did he react when he heard that sentence?
You know, Nancy, what was notable was how little reaction there was. He looked down at his hands, they were clasped in his lap, and he just looked defeated. The same with his family. It was very quiet in that courtroom, very solemn, and it was a drastic difference from earlier because this day stretched on for a really long time.
When the time came, Sean Diddy Combs stood before the court and spoke words of regret. He apologized to Cassie and the other victims, saying he was ashamed of what he'd done and would never do it again. But his words fell flat. Neither the judge nor the victims believed him. Cassie herself wrote a powerful letter to the judge, confessing that she still feared for her life, that if Diddy ever walked free, she might never feel safe again. And as the courtroom watched his cold, unshaken reaction to the verdict, it became clear that remorse wasn't truly there. The judge remembered one thing. Reports said Diddy was hosting his notorious freak-offs even on the day of his arrest.
He said that his actions were disgusting, they were shameful, and they were sick. He said that he's not a larger-than-life person. He is a human being, and that he got lost in the excess, in the ego. His voice was shaking. He was crying today. I saw him wiping tears from his face in court. And he ultimately said that he is humbled and he's broken.
Even fellow artist 50 Cent stepped into the courtroom drama, writing directly to the judge. In his letter, he claimed that Sean Diddy Combs had personally threatened him and made it clear that he didn't believe Diddy had changed in any way. His words carried weight, coming from someone who's seen the industry's darkness up close. For 50 Cent, this wasn't about rivalry or fame. It was about warning the court that Diddy's charm and apologies were nothing but an act. The letter added another layer to a case already overflowing with fear, power, and betrayal.
Tonight, prosecutors asking a judge to sentence Sean Diddy Combs to more than 11 years in federal prison, arguing he engaged in violence and put others in fear. A stark contrast to Combs' legal team, who are seeking 14 months, which would see him walk free in a matter of weeks, as he's already served 13 months in prison.
Look for the judge to land somewhere in the middle, split the difference, a sentence of maybe 4 to 6 years.
The moment the judge read the sentence, Sean Diddy Combs collapsed to his knees and began to cry. For a man who once stood untouchable, the reality of prison hit hard. He knew what awaited him behind those walls, and it terrified him. Sources say Diddy never believed he'd actually be locked up. But now, with years ahead of him, a darker possibility is emerging. Whispers are spreading that he may start naming names. If Diddy decides to cooperate with federal investigators and expose those who worked alongside him, his sentence could be reduced. But that move could also make him a marked man, even from behind bars.
Chaotic scenes as Diddy's family came to court to support him at his sentencing.
How you feeling today, Mama?
His mother, Janice, was followed by his son, Quincy, and 3 daughters who entered court hand in hand. Another son and his girlfriend were also there to show their support.
The eve of his sentencing, Sean Diddy Combs, the fallen music mogul, writing a federal judge pleading for mercy. He writes in part, "I have to admit, my downfall was rooted in my selfishness." He apologized to 2 of the women who accused him of abuse, including Cassie Ventura, who he assaulted. This as prosecutors are asking for an 11-year prison sentence for Combs after he was found guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution.
Even Diddy's own legal team was left stunned. They entered the courtroom that morning expecting parole, maybe even a chance to walk their client out a free man. But instead, they watched as Sean Diddy Combs was handed one of the harshest outcomes imaginable. The shock was written all over their faces. Outside the courthouse, Diddy's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, faced reporters and made a bold statement. He declared that this fight was far from over and promised they would challenge every detail of the case, pushing to have the entire conviction thrown out if possible. But deep down, even they knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. Ironically, the emotional video that Sean Diddy Combs hoped would save him may have done the opposite. Right after the clip was shown in court, Diddy admitted that he'd been under the influence of drugs for most of his life, and that this was the first time in 25 years he'd been sober. That revelation changed everything. It meant that even the heartfelt video he'd presented to win sympathy wasn't made in clarity or truth. The same footage meant to humanize him instead reminded the judge and the public of how deep his addiction and denial had gone. It was a confession that cost him dearly.
The strongest basis is that the jury reached a verdict on coercion. It found there was not coercion, and I think the judge said coercion today as a basis for a sentence at least a dozen times. We think that that is unconstitutional. We think that a jury verdict should mean more than our jury's verdict seems to mean, and so we are planning to appeal.
Absolutely. Filed a cross appeal. What would happen in that regard if they filed a cross appeal and then could Sean Diddy Combs get a higher sentence?
He would not get a higher sentence, and they're not gonna cross appeal. We're gonna appeal. We think we're right, and they'll respond to the appeal, and it'll be decided by the Second Circuit as soon as.
Tell us about the conversation you had with your client after the sentencing.
Consensual. The judge clearly thought the sexual encounters weren't consensual.
Because he's biased.
Make of his remarks.
He's biased.
If anyone, I'm happy to go. So we think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean, the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no sex trafficking. There was no racketeering. Everything was consensual. Everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the prostitution offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror,
yes,
one that we did not choose, and that he second-guessed the jury's verdict.
One of the jurors who sat through every moment of the trial, who saw the disturbing evidence and the shocking tapes, revealed that he actually expected Sean Diddy Combs to receive a much longer sentence. The horrors they witnessed inside that courtroom painted a picture of abuse that stretched across decades. Diddy's so-called freak-offs weren't recent. They had been happening for more than 30 years, leaving behind countless victims. For the jurors, the truth was undeniable. After seeing everything he did, many believed justice hadn't gone far enough, and that Diddy truly deserved far more time behind bars. Even the jurors were stunned when they discovered that Sean Diddy Combs had planned to walk free the very next week. His confidence was almost unsettling. He truly believed the court would let him go. Throughout the trial, Diddy carried himself as if the verdict was already in his favor, convinced that his fame and fortune could outshine the truth. He insisted that he had done nothing wrong, that he didn't deserve any of this. But in that courtroom, reality hit hard. The same arrogance that once built his empire now stood as proof that he still refused to face the gravity of his own actions.
That he lost everything from his businesses to time with his children. He's a single father. He also apologizes notably to the women who prosecutors say he abused. He says that video, that infamous video of him abusing Cassie, plays over in his head daily. I literally lost my mind. He says he's a changed man. He says he's sober for the first time in 25 years. He will have an opportunity to address the court there tomorrow. Remember, of course, his lawyers are asking for just 14 months. Prosecutors asking for far greater, 11 years behind bars. He was acquitted of the charges, though, of course, that could have kept him behind bars for the rest of his life.
According to a former mobster, Sean Diddy Combs is walking into a whole new world of danger. Now that he's being transferred to a federal facility, survival becomes his next battle. Inside those walls, money talks, and men will do anything for it. With his massive fortune and reputation, Diddy instantly becomes a target. Everyone knows who he is, and that fame could be his biggest weakness. What makes it worse is that he's not headed to a maximum security prison. there won't be 24/7 surveillance or elite protection around him. For the first time, Diddy's power and influence mean nothing, and his safety is no longer guaranteed. Diddy's defense team continues to fight, insisting that Sean Diddy Combs doesn't deserve the punishment he's facing. They argue he's already suffered enough and should be allowed to walk free on parole. Their latest move? A push to have the entire case dismissed altogether. According to them, since Diddy was cleared of the more serious charges, the rest should never have stood in court. But for many watching, this plea feels like a desperate attempt to rewrite the story, a final grasp for control in a case that's already shaken Hollywood to its core.
Prosecutors are asking for a substantial sentence of just over 11 years, writing it's needed because Combs is unrepentant, that he largely conceded his conduct, the violence, domestic abuse, drug use, and distribution, and bribery. Former girlfriend Cassie Ventura, who testified at trial, submitted a victim impact letter that reads in part, quote, "My worries that Sean Combs or his associates will come after me and my family is my reality." She says they moved, and she is, quote, "keeping as private and quiet as I possibly can because I am so scared that if he walks free, his first actions will be swift retribution towards me and others who spoke up about his abuse."
At the end of his trial, Sean Diddy Combs spoke his final words to the judge, a moment that's now been made public. He confessed to everything, saying he was done with his old life and would never repeat his mistakes. But the judge wasn't convinced. Behind the scenes, reports revealed that even while locked up, Diddy was reaching out to witnesses, pressuring them to stay quiet. The courtroom silence that followed his confession spoke volumes. Because when a man truly changes, he doesn't try to silence the truth. And that's why, when the sentence came down, no one believed his remorse was real. Now, Sean Diddy Combs is clinging to one last hope, getting his sentence reduced. But the odds aren't in his favor. The judge reviewed every piece of evidence, even details not directly tied to his conviction, and ultimately declared that Diddy posed a danger to those around him. His future now rests on two risky options: appeal the decision or cooperate with the federal agents. Because in cases like this, there's always a bigger name, a higher target. And whispers inside the industry suggest the feds might trade Diddy's freedom for someone even more powerful. The question is, who could that be?
He's disappointed, although he really shouldn't be. I think, a 4-year sentence here with already credit for the year or so that he has in, I think he did very well with respect to all of the drama and all of the circumstance around this trial. There was a lot of bad stuff out there, and I'm not saying, I'm not passing judgment on that, but it just looked really bad, and he could have gotten up to 10 years or 11 years. So I think the judge, took everything into consideration. I think his family today made a very good plea for him, and I think he did very well. That's my opinion.
So what in your experience, like your own experience and other, inmates that you've seen go through it and then show back up at the cell block, how do they take this? Do they bury their head in the pillow and cry, or do they keep their head held high and just pack up their stuff and wait for their assigned new prison? Like, tell me everything.
Well, everybody's different. I'm sure he went back was somewhat disappointed, so he's probably, dwelling on that. Hey, it could have been differently. Maybe I should have gotten out. Maybe he's a little bit upset, a little bit angry. I get it. All those emotions come into play. But right now, he's got to get ready. He'll spend a couple of weeks there until they designate him to a new facility. And he'll be a lot better off in prison than he is in the federal jail. At least there you can move around and you got some freedom on the yard and things like that. My thought is he'll collect himself, get himself together. There are ways for him to improve himself. They have the Bureau of Prisons now has a drug program.
When the verdict first dropped, Sean Diddy Combs confidently told everyone he was coming home. It was a bold statement, considering he had been staring down a possible 20-year sentence, but somehow he walked away with just 4. Now whispers are spreading across the industry. If Diddy decides to cooperate, he could pull back the curtain on some of the most powerful names in Hollywood. Insiders say this may only be the beginning, the first domino to fall in a chain that could shake the entire entertainment world. And as the walls close in, many are wondering, who's next? As federal agents continue to dig deeper, many believe this sentence is only the start of something much bigger. If Sean Diddy Combs begins naming names, the hidden darkness of Hollywood could finally be exposed for the world to see. The question now is, will Diddy stay silent to protect those around him, or will he pull everyone down with him? One thing's for sure, this story is nowhere near its end. Stay tuned, because what comes next could change everything we thought we knew about power, fame, and the price of silence.